Welcome to Coffee and the Bull.
Hey guys, it's Mike and John with Coffee and the Bull. We want to say thank you all for taking a moment out of your day and listening to this episode, giving us a moment to hopefully bring a little bit of happiness to your life. I think the topic we decided to talk about today was just kind of when things they don't really go the way you think it's going to go in life. You have have, I'm not going to say disappointments, but you have expectations that don't fall through.
I think we identified it as the disillusions of life's grandeur.
Yeah, he wants to be fancy with his words or whatever. But honestly, to kind of stop beating around the bush with it and just kind of dive off into the topic. I remember growing up and going through school. Everything was always you were preparing for when you entered adulthood.
Right.
And
we summed it up about at 16 you get your permit, at 18 you're able to buy tobacco products or whatever it is, and 21 you're able to drink, and you have this. I'm about to be 18. I can get out of high school. I can graduate. Move out of house, and I'm an adult now, and that's kind of
what it was for me. And I know that I was by no means a bad kid, but I was your typical teenager.
I was a bad kid.
You were a bad kid. But I remember when my parents would get on to me, whether I earned it or felt that I earned it or not. It was they drop off some type of punishment or something like that.
Right.
And I remember thinking to myself, I can't wait till I'm 18. Oh, I'm getting out of this house. Right. You ain't telling me nothing. Like this is stupid. I don't know why you do this. And you have this idea of what life is going to be like. And then you go to your 18th birthday. You wake up in the morning, you realize nothing's different. And honestly, nobody looks at you any different. Nobody cares that you just turned 18. Honestly,
right.
Your parents do because hey, they you're not necessarily legally their responsibility anymore. Their baby's done grown up and stuff
right.
like that. Like,
their job.
Don't get me wrong, my child, I'm not looking forward for him to turn 18. That being said, he's going to be,
Right.
And it's the same thing that I did, my parents did, his parents did. It was you look forward to turning 18 because hey, that's when I'm an adult. Right. The world will respect me because now I've reached that milestone.
Right.
And when you turn 18, you realize no, that's not what happens at all. Nobody cares. Right. And honestly, they don't look at you any better than they did when you were 16, 17, 14. You have more responsibilities from the legal side of things. You can't you can't just go do whatever you want.
You gotta go, jury duty, all that junk.
So yeah, you got to do all that, but you don't get any more respect, and it's not downplaying certain things, but honestly, even as like a 35 or 25-year-old, whatever age group you're at, the people who come before you never look at you with any more respect just based off of your age.
Right.
I know that when I was 23, 24 years old. And I'd graduated college. People would refer to me as still being a boy, a young kid. And I'm like, bro, I'm an adult. I am 22 years old. Like I know what I'm doing. I bought my own truck. I'm about I think 23. I think we bought our own house. Me and my wife had bought our house. I think we were 23. Right in there, give or take. 23, 24, right in there. We had bought our own house, and so it was like, I've got my own house, I've got my own truck. Who are you talking about calling me a boy or calling me a child or whatever? And they don't mean any disrespect from it, but it's you always look at the younger kid or younger generation as being children compared to you, and that's it's the same concept as we always millennials got blamed by was it Gen X? Blamed millennials for the world's going downhill. Boomers blame Gen X because they had spiky pink hair and all this other weird stuff.
Right.
And that rock and roll. But it's and now I don't even know what generation they're on now. Anyway, it just gets stupid because each generation thinks the other generation, the ones that's coming behind them, are going to ruin the world, and that's not necessarily the case, obviously.
Well, and I mean, not to derail too far, but it genuinely has nothing to do with anything. I have yet to see a mind frame based on generation.
That's any different than it used to be.
Right. It's just a mind
technology
frame based on
changes.
Society.
Right. The application of technology changes.
Right.
And so you'll have different things like that. But
to keep us back on track, because I'm the king of derailment here, and Mike usually wants to slap me halfway through an episode. But what I know for me, when I turned 18, 19, I was graduating high school, and like I distinctly remember my dad. I walked across the stage, had my diploma in my hand, and I looked at my dad, and I was like, he was not the "I love you, Dad." He wasn't the "Congratulations" or "I'm proud of you, Dad." That wasn't my dad. Like, he wasn't a bad guy, but that just wasn't who he was. And I remember walking across that stage, and I'm going, "Hey, man, you proud of me, Dad?" And he's like, "Yeah, so about that, you have 30 days, pay rent or get out."
Right.
And like I knew in his brain,
wait a minute, what? I thought you loved me.
Right.
Yeah.
I knew in his brain, like I'm going to teach my son responsibility. But in my brain, it was, well, I guess I better join the military because I'm not paying you rent. I don't have a job.
Right.
You know, like, but it was in my brain. It was, when I'm 18, I'll tell my dad this. And
Anna Kendrick did an interview. She's like, I'm still poor. You know? I'm not paying you rent.
Right. Like, I genuinely, in my brain, was like, at 18, I could tell my dad to screw off or whatever, and which I would not do if you ever learn how to use a TikTok, Dad. But he's a massive man. I'm still afraid of that guy. He's in his 70s, and I'm still afraid of that man. But, like, I knew in my life, almost in his 70s. I had to do math in my brain. I'm sorry.
Right.
But I felt like, that's when I'm an adult, like, do what I want. And, like I showed up with a tattoo. My first tattoo it was so stupid. It was Old English. It was 3 letters. It said Mom. And he was like, better scrub off with an SOS pad. I was like, okay, guy. You know how that works.
Yeah, thanks, Boomer.
Yeah. But no, so it was like, I felt like at 18, I'm going to be an adult. And quickly realized that I still live at home. I'm still in school. And Daddy don't care. You're going to follow the rules while you live in his house. And it made me laugh because we talked about it earlier. I joined the military. I go to combat. I come back from this, long deployment where we're doing military work. That's how I'll word that today. And I come back from life or death situations where my life is in other people's hands. Other people's lives are in my hands. I've taken lives. My life has been close, And I go to see my dad for 30 days of leave, and like first night I'm like, all right, Dad, I'm gonna go out in town. I'm gonna go catch some friends, and he goes, all right, see you at 9 o'clock. And I was like, what's at 9 o'clock? He goes, your curfew. I was like, I'm a grown man.
Right. How dare you?
I have taken lives, sir. How dare you sully my reputation as an adult? And he was like, at my house, you're gonna be in the door at 9 o'clock, or you're not gonna be inside this house. Like, I'll see you in the morning when I wake up.
Right.
I was like, okay, well, I'll be here at 9 o'clock. Like, and I was like, but at the same time,
I'm a decorated war hero.
Right. Right. Like,
they use that term loosely, but still,
loosely. But no, like it made me laugh because, like, even now, like, I'm a grown man. I've got children over the age of 18, and I've got children that are super young. And if I go see my dad, he'll look me dead in my face. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go run into town and see something. He'll be like, be back by 9 o'clock.
Right.
That's when the door locks. And he, my first wife, we had stayed there for some leave after some combat time, and I had told him I was gonna run and see an old buddy of mine who was a little bit further out, and he said, better be back by 9 o'clock or the door's locked. And I was like, Dad, I am in my middle 20s at this point. I think I was like 26, 27. And I was like, I have brought my wife and children to your home. And he goes, yeah, and they're not going to unlock the door after 9 o'clock.
Right.
Because those are the rules. And I was like, okay. All right, well, never mind. I'll wait till tomorrow morning.
We'll go get a hotel.
Yeah. No, we weren't. Military pay you good, but they don't pay you that good.
Right.
It ain't hotel money good.
So I know one of the things that, for me it was, hey, I'm going to graduate high school, and then I immediately went into college because at the time it was, the thought process that I was told was just get you a degree in anything, to make you more successful and all this other stuff. If you don't get a degree, you'll never be successful, and that's a load of crap.
Right.
But anyway,
you were a super nerd, right? Like you were like a valedictorian.
No, I wasn't. I wasn't valedictorian. I was in the top 10 of my class.
You were all the dictorians.
But it was I had a lot of scholarships to a couple different agencies, or not agencies, a couple different universities. I wound up not paying for the first 4 years of my college, I didn't pay anything. So, yeah, I was definitely on the nerd side. And I remember thinking, I was like, I'm going to get out of college and I'm going to be a success. Like, they're going to, in the same way that, the teachers wanted me in their class because, I'm doing whatever,
Wait, your teachers wanted you in class?
I was a nerd.
You?
I was a nerd. I'm not going to lie. I was a nerd.
The defeat in your face, like, I was a nerd.
Completely different than I am now.
Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah.
but it was one of those things where,
teachers were glad when I said
I wanted
school.
people to want me to go to work for them, and so I remember thinking, I was like, I'm going to get my degree, and then all these jobs and all these employers they're going to fight for me because they're going to see that, hey, I was top of the class in school. I had great grades. I had this award and that award, and I was in the beta club.
Right.
Well, guess who doesn't care about any of that?
Right.
Every single employer in the world. The only thing an employer cares about is if you're going to make the company money.
Right.
That is it.
Right.
And
look, in the military was the same way.
Right.
Like I was in boot camp where guys were like, "Oh, I went to college," or I'm gonna graduate here as a this rank or this rank, and I'm like, okay, cool, and you get to your unit and they're like, what have you done? Like, that was a big thing in the military. Like, we had dudes. I know a guy. He had unfortunately, he ended up with testicular cancer right after he'd gotten out of boot camp. So he went into a whole different start to the military, and they did whatever they did, and he was fine, and he was able to come back to a unit. Well, the way the military promotes is based on your time in service and your time at the rank that you have. So he made it to a rank of corporal. And
without ever doing anything.
Without ever doing anything but books and online classes and stuff. Well, in a Marine Corps, that's not going to get you somewhere.
Y'all don't do nothing with books.
Right.
Who told you could read?
We had a book called Math for Marines. That was the book. It was a legit
it was like one page that says get somebody else to do your accounting.
Right. 1 + 1, and everybody scratched their head. But he showed up as a corporal, and I remember my corporals, the guys that had been in battles of Fallujah and real wars. They were like, who is this guy coming in barking in order?
Right.
And I remember him. He stepped in. His name was Jerry. That was his first name. I won't say his last name, but he was like, well, I've got you by time and grade. And I remember the two corporals I had going, let's see you do that time and grade. Let's see how that works out for you. Step up to the plate. And it's like, I learned right then and there. It doesn't matter what rank you are.
Right.
What matters is what you've done and what you've proven to the men around you. And that's life.
Right. Well, and that's kind of you kind of jumped into that a little bit earlier. That's going to be a spoiler for the end of the podcast. But yeah, that's honestly that it doesn't matter what certification or what degree you get or you go if you could be a mechanic, you go to whatever trade school class and you learn all the stuff. But until you actually apply it in the field, nobody cares.
Well, and it's not just applied; it's a length of time that you've applied it. It's the resourcefulness that you are, that people see you as an asset, not a liability, and that's one of the things that they don't tell us as kids, because they pump you up with this mentality that, oh, if you strive hard, you work hard, you do X, Y, and Z, people are going to fight to employ you, and they're going to be knocking down your door to give you a job.
And, they don't know your name.
Right, and that's the reality of it is, you got to strive to be able to push yourself to obtain what's required just to get in the door. But in reality, if you get in the door and then you sit down and just expect it all to hand you, you're never going to get anywhere. And nobody prepares us for that.
Well, you get a lot of guys who, and I'm saying this as someone with a college degree, you got a lot of guys who they'll go to college or whatever, and they'll get a degree in anything from basket weaving to brain surgery,
right,
and and they'll walk out with a kind of a chip on their shoulder, being arrogant as if it's owed to them because of they've been through whatever procedure or whatever certification or whatever that you should look at them for guidance when they haven't done the applicable stuff. And we used to have, when I was in the working in some of the plants out here, you would have engineers come through, and you could always tell which engineers had started were fresh and which ones had been doing it a minute, not just because of their gray hair and stuff, but how they interacted with you, because we were doing more of the trade skill work where you turn the wrenches, taking things apart, and there's a difference between doing the knuckle busting work and doing the paperwork on it, and you could look at theoretically this should come out this way. Well, realistically, you know, you got scale build up or whatever that's keeping this bundle from coming out of this exchanger that, you know, it's just not it's not working, and we got to kind of do a little ingenuity or whatever. And sometimes, you know, that was always interesting that you could pinpoint them, you know, but it's the same thing. You look at, you know, even with us both being in law enforcement, you look at young guys fresh out of the academy now, and I'm not envious of those guys at all, you know, and because they're coming out of the academy the same way we did, you know, full of piss and vinegar.
Right.
They're excited. They want to go. They want, and I'm talking about guys who want to make a difference. They want to take and do a good job. They want to go help people. I'm not talking about people on power trips and stuff like that. Like genuinely good guys. And they come out of the police academy with this instruction that, hey, when you step out on scene, you own that scene. Like you have to take control. Well, then you look at them, and they're you know they're technically grown men, but they weigh 145 pounds.
Right.
They don't have a lick of facial hair on their face. You know, it looks like they're 14. And you expect other grown men, 40, 50 years old, who are angry and drunk and belligerent,
whatever situation,
and you know, and just looking down on them, and it's very hard for those guys to take control. And so I don't envy them at all. But then you'll notice after several weeks of being on their own, after they get through the training phase, all of a sudden you see the public start talking to them, or you see their attitudes kind of change, where as they're dealing with members of the public or complainants or whatever, the way they're talking to people changes because they realize, hey, you have to earn that respect. You don't just walk just because you graduated from the academy and you know you got a badge on your chest and you know you get the keys to a unit and
you learned all the fancy lingo and the nicknames for this.
You know you got the 10 codes and all this other stuff, and you step up and you know you may look like you know squared away and everything, but it's all in how you present yourself, and you have to earn that with a lot of the members of the public.
Well, the problem I see with it is we have this thought process when it comes to developing people to being in positions like the military, law enforcement, you know, first responder situation, you know, things. And so like with the Marine Corps, going through boot camp, it was 90 days, you know, maybe a little bit less, a little bit more for everybody. And when you go through it, the first month is just break you down and make you feel like the lowest thing on earth. And the second month is a slow climb to building yourself back up. And that third month is just polishing you into believing that
you are the best.
You are the best. You are untouchable. And there is nothing in life that you can't, you know, crush, kill, maim, or destroy, because you are created by the Marine Corps. And in law enforcement, it's the same thing. We instill a false sense of strength, security, and abilities that not everybody has.
Right.
And we talk about this all the time. You have people who will graduate the police academy, ride with us for 12-hour shift or maybe an entire training rotation, and we'll know within 30 minutes to an hour of being around that one individual if they're going to make it, if they're going to be good at their job, if they're going to suck at their job, if they should look in an entirely different line of work. And to be completely, you know, transparent, there were several times where somebody would be put in my unit and they would go, tell us at the end of your shift if we should keep them where they're at or if they should move on. And there are a lot of people who rode in my unit that at the end of it, I'd be like, no, this is not for them. They will never have the confidence in themselves to be able to do this job, because in the military, in law enforcement, you can't go to every scene with the I'm fully dressed up and I'm polishing my uniform and I'm gonna walk out here and be the nicest guy in the world and everybody's just like, what a nice officer. Like that's not.
Well, you want it to be. You want it to be.
Right. And in a perfect world, we could walk up into scenarios like that where all hell is broke loose, chaos is everywhere, and we can just walk in with this serendipitous attitude, which wasn't good word use, and be like...
It's word of the day, guys.
Right. And be like, hello, everybody, I'm Officer Happy Pants. What's going on? And everybody's happy again. And so, like, for you and I, and another thing that we've talked about before is we recognize immediately a situation and the individuals we're interacting with, and we identify that there are people you can walk up to and say, hello, sir, ma'am, how are you today? And then there's other times where certain people based on the way that we're raised in life. Like, I know for myself, when I get angry and I'm starting to lose control of myself in, whatever situation in my personal life, if somebody were to walk up and be like, hey, sir, how are you? I'd be like, get yo off my property. Where if they had walked up and like, hey, man, what's your deal? Mm-hmm. Like, you're up here, let's come down here. It would have a different effect on me because we're almost speaking that same language. And we don't tell people that. You know what I mean? They don't know that until day one in the car where they see different sides of the officer depending on where they answer a call at. And it's all the way that life continues from early on childhood to adulthood. It's the way that we're trained, and I don't know what
does that say?
We got a little notification.
It says live disconnected, trying to reconnect now.
Oh, no worries. We're still recording the other thing.
Yeah. So we'll keep going.
Yeah. So sorry about that for everybody listening on the podcast. We're doing a live at the same time that we're filming this episode, so we're really just trying to make sure that we got two different platforms running at the same time, just trying to cover a lot of bases. So apologize for the sound you guys heard in the background, a little break in the conversation between Mike and I, but
yeah, so we're still going.
You want me to work on that? You want to? So anyway, I was gonna say it's gotta still be going, because I'm still getting notifications on this side. But no, so life kind of leads you down a path that says, you've got milestones, and you're gonna be able to accomplish all this, and you're gonna be able to do all of this, and you're about to, you're gonna break records, and you're gonna be this amazing, great person. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the things that I hated as a child when people used to tell me you could be anything you want to be, and as dumb as this will sound, I remember in my brain going, I want to be Abe Lincoln. Can't be Abe Lincoln, And granted, I know that sounds stupid, but that's the disillusion that we put into our own children.
Right. Well, it's if you work hard, you can, if you could be the president, whatever your dream is, you can, and you can't necessarily always achieve your dream.
Right. And
so that's still getting notifications. You said.
Yeah, I'm still getting likes and people hopping in, but that's kind of where we're going with today's episode. Is that we're led from early childhood throughout teenage years into adulthood, that there's a path. And if you stick to certain characteristics and certain traits and certain methods to the madness, that you'll be able to achieve and accomplish all of these great things of grandeur. And in reality, we end up going down different roads, or life brings us to different paths that don't necessarily bring us that. Like, you and your wife were buying a house at 23. I didn't buy a house until my mid-30s.
I may be wrong on that. Maybe 25.
Still, though.
Anyway,
you know what I mean?
But so I remember it was one of the things where I realized that as I was breaching into the adult world, for lack of a better term,
right,
I realized that all the things that I had been taught up to this point weren't going to be true, or weren't going to be applicable the way that they were described to me.
I'll check it. Go ahead.
So it was, at the time I was working night shifts at a warehouse. So it wasn't like like it was back-breaking work, and you were constantly tired and constantly doing things. And I was working full-time hours. Like it was, I think I was averaging 36 to 40 hours a week, right in there. It wasn't just, I'm delivering pizzas part-time while I'm going through college. Like I was working a full-time job. And then I was also going to college full-time, averaging 15 hours of classwork each semester. And so I remember how stressful I was, and we went to a Christmas gathering at one of my grandparents' houses, and some distant guy, I don't even know, he was a family member, but so distant that I didn't even know his name, or I can't remember his name now, but I remember him, he was asking, hey, how's everything going in college and stuff like that now? And I was like, man, it's actually kind of rough. He goes, yeah, the real world is a lot different than what you thought it was going to be, huh? It's, the real world's a tough place. I bet you want to go back home to mom and daddy. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I'm like, I wasn't saying anything about being uncomfortable or anything like that. Instead, it was, no, I'm tired. I'm tired because I'm not only am I working a full-time job, I'm also going to school full-time, and it's exhausting. It's stressful, and it was strenuous, and that's why I will never take away from anybody who actually gets a college degree, who graduates, because it shows, you can stick something out for an extended period of time, 4 years, 5 years. Some people even bring it out further than that.
Oh, yeah,
But
doctors,
if you
dentists, and all
yeah,
that.
but if you're working a full-time job in addition to doing that, man, when it comes to I remember sleeping in the parking lot of the college, and
Why?
because I would get a couple hours of sleep, go to class, and then get out of class, take a nap in the parking lot, and go right back to work. And so it was very, like, it was a strenuous time, and so that's kind of what I don't want to take away from people who go get degrees and stuff like that. But there's this misconception that people are just going to appreciate you afterwards. That's not the case. It comes with a lot of work outside of that.
Right.
And what I found, at least in my life, and I know that, or I would hope that it would be the same for other people, is that you can go get all the certifications in the world. You can go get all whatever degree, whatever. People only look at least guys, because we started this podcast for guys. Guys only respect you if they see that, one, you're walking in the same shoes they are,
right,
but you're doing good in those shoes,
right.
And like if you show up, we'll throw a job out there, a Boilermaker out in the plants, if you show up and you're arrogant, oh, I know everything about everything, I don't need any of y'all or whatever, you're gonna find yourself alone on a couple jobs. But if you go out there humble and you bring up ideas that, hey, they work whenever you come into an issue and they work, people look at you differently. The same thing with law enforcement. If you show up, and you think you're God's gift to law enforcement, that, hey, you're here to save the day,
right.
and you got the only solution to everything, and they're going to like it or leave it, type approach, then you're going to find yourself, hey, nobody when we all go get coffee and donuts or burgers or whatever, we're not calling you, we're not going to invite you. It's amazing how that works, But if you show up and you're part of the team, and you're actually trying to do good in the position, and you show that, hey, you're using your noggin, but you're also being humble about it. All of a sudden you catch yourself where people are calling, hey man, let's go do this together. Let's go do, we want to go run warrants, and we want your advice on this. How would you handle this situation?
Well, and that's one of the things that I learned very quickly with coming into law enforcement. One of the things that was a culture shock for me is, in the military I was one person, and that was a person that, based on my rank, my experience, my time in the military, and how I led my men, and the way that I controlled things, and the way that I did things, it gave me a certain level of respect, and almost as if it was given, but it was also demanded. There was a presence to my person when I went into a room. And when you leave the military, there's a part of you that has to come to terms with the fact that all of that goes on a hanger.
You're nobody now.
Yeah, it goes on the hanger, and you hang that up in the closet of done and over with. Because now, if I were to walk into the same room the same room or similar type room now, and have the attitude that I had when I was in the military, I would be laughed out. I would immediately be told that hey, you're gonna sit down and shut up. Like, in this environment, that's not gonna fly here. And I had to eat humble pie quick, because it was not the, hey, shut up, sit down, do this. And people went, yes, Sergeant. In this reality, you got to read the room before you walk in and command that presence. And we talk about it now with coming into this line of work. You can't walk in and be like, well, I read this statute, and it says this, and expect that because you read it, that's exactly what it means. Because I know that you and I, we argue all the time about statutes. Sometimes because I like to mess with you. But other times it's hey, what does this mean when you read it? And I had to be humble about it, because I'm like, hey, this is what I thought it meant. And you, without being a jerk, because you knew I wasn't messing with you, you were like, no, that's not what this means. This means this, and this is what it's trying to say. And not only do you have to understand that law, but you have to understand the way it's written, because it's not written by cops.
Right.
It's not white and black. Right. It's written by people who want to legally define it, and at the same time they want to construct it in a way that there's not necessarily a loophole, but there's a way to what's the term? Not navigate it, but negotiate what the statute is.
Well, it's the thing is, I don't know. We'll have a conversation about
That's a whole different
about
topic,
statutes. That'll be a whole different thing. When we're both not linked to agencies, probably.
Right. My bad.
But it's one of the things where, like you said, you had to take a dose of humble pie. You know, and I think we don't discuss that with guys coming up. At least I know I haven't. With some of the guys who, I've had some dudes who I trained in law enforcement. Who I think they were 22 years old. Very, very young.
Do you think that we address it, but we don't address it in a way of, hey man, you're going to need to be humble for a little while? And here's why. Do you remember the story you told me about when you went to have breakfast with Scott, and before you could sit at the big kids table, you had to tell them the difference between something?
So when I started off in law enforcement, I was a new guy. I had this idea of what it's going to be
because
the first day of the shift, I'm excited. Hey, I'm waiting on the next bank robber. That's all I'm doing. I'm waiting on the call to come out where we all go running out of the restaurant, guns drawn, diving behind cars. I'm waiting on that type of moment, and so I hop in his unit. And I'm thinking we're about to go do something. He goes, "Hey, we have shift meeting." I'm like, "Well, that's odd because we're leaving the station right now.
Right.
They call it the substation. We're leaving the substation right now. We're going to get gas. After this, we have shift meeting. Where are we doing shift meeting at?" He goes, "Just get in the car." So we're riding, and I realized shift meeting meant we were going to the local PJ's, which is a coffee house in South Louisiana.
Right.
We were going to PJ's, and we were going to be drinking coffee until we get the first call for service. And so I'm like, all right, I like coffee. If y'all hadn't been able to tell, for those of y'all who's been following the podcast, I like coffee. So I'm like, this is great. My wife's going to hate it because she could, at the time, she hated coffee.
Right.
But she also hated the fact when I'd spend money at a coffee house because coffee's expensive at a coffee house.
Right.
So we go to PJ's. I get me some coffee, and I sit down. I remember sitting down, and I'm meeting guys that I'd never met before. They're telling me, roughly how long they've been doing it, what they've been doing, what they like to do, things like that. And so I'm thinking I'm one of the guys, right? And because we're wearing the same uniform, like it's the brotherhood, and all this other stuff, right?
It's so bad when you say it like that.
I know, but I remember I was so excited. And I sit down, and somebody's saying they're BSing about whatever, and I decided it was a great idea for me to add myself to the conversation, because I'm going to be part of the Cool Kids Club, right? And I forget exactly what I said, but I made a comment to include myself in the conversation, and I remember Scott, who was my training officer. He looks over at me, and he asked me, "Hey, what's this statute?" I couldn't even tell you what statute was, but I knew at that time I didn't know what they were. Right. I was like, I don't know. He goes, in that case, shut your mouth. You go sit in the booth over there and you read them until you can tell me what the statutes are. And so I had to get up. I'm embarrassed because everybody's looking at me, and they knew it was going to happen. Like it was set up. It's happened to every single new guy since then. They all, they're laughing about it because they knew it was going to happen. Meanwhile, I'm like red faced. I'm, come on, man. I'm mad. I'm like a kid.
Little brother that finally got invited, but you got to sit at
and so I'm getting kicked off. I legit had to sit at another booth while they're all laughing and talking about concerts that they're going to and all this other stuff. And I'm sitting there, reading the most boring book. Criminal code book is absolutely probably the worst thing to be reading at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
And
but in hindsight, was that not
for me? It was right. I could say that it was a training experience to say, hey, you haven't earned this yet. You haven't got to the spot where we're going to look for your opinion right now.
Right. But as men, that's how
that's a lot of how we do things.
That's the abrupt. It's not pretty. It's not cute. It's very much a hey. Let me slap you in the face. This is reality. You're not ready for the big kids table yet. Right. Go sit over there.
Well, what I found is sometimes it's you have the instances like that, but even I remember again for the guys that are listening that aren't in law enforcement, it could be mechanics or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I remember turning wrenches into plants again, and if you showed up with an arrogant attitude, they would check you real quick.
Oh yeah,
and all of a sudden, you found that your pliers were missing or whatever,
right.
And there was a bunch of, obviously I'm not advocating retaliatory things or, job site hazing or anything like that. What I noticed was you'd have a group of guys standing around that they've been working together for months. They knew how, hey, if we're having this issue with this tool or whatever, or we need this done, this is a guy you call for this. If you need a crane, this is a guy who's good with this. They knew everybody's skill set, and so if you walked in not knowing, hey, you got 6 guys here that each one has a different skill set that they like doing, but they're really proficient at, and you walk in and you think you're just going to step on their toes because you're the new guy, you got ambitions and all this other. They don't care about your ambitions. They don't care what you're trying to do. Right. They care about doing their job, getting a paycheck, going home, and having a good weekend.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to show up and you're going to cause drama with that, or you're going to make it where certain things aren't going to run smoothly and create more work because, again, you got these ambitions, but you haven't got the experience yet, they're going to wind up checking. Right. They're going to check you real hard, and it's not going to be a fun time.
And I remember my first dose of the humble pie, and it was actually when I was a mechanic. Mm-hmm. It was when I was working at Harley Davidson, and I started working for this guy George, right here at Hammond Harley, which is no longer in business, so I don't have to worry about him suing me. But George was the lead technician. He was the top mechanic. He actually owns a shop here in Albany. Called George's Garage. It's a phenomenal place if you're in the Albany area looking for a motorcycle mechanic. George owns and operates the whole thing. Great mechanic. Shout out to George. But I remember George was the lead tech over there, and I'd been there for a day or so. And George had, of the 8 bays that were back there, George had 6 of them. Mm-hmm. And me and this other tech, Rob, good guy, but old crusty man is the best way I can describe Rob. He was grumpy, drink his coffee, leave him alone, don't argue with him. He's just the old man in the corner. And I looked at George and I was like, hey man, I need a bay. And he goes, you haven't earned a bay. And like George had literally every bay full of like 8 different motorcycles that he was going on. And they had told him, they said, look, give the guy a bay, let him do his thing. He's fast. He knows what he's doing. He's quick. We just don't bother him when he goes out to smoke. Because that was my thing. Is like, leave me alone. Let me do my work. I'll smoke when I want to smoke, and I promise I'll get all my work done, and you guys won't have to worry about me. And so by the end of the day, George had given me 3 bays. He was like, hey, no, you're banging them out.
Right.
You've shown me that you can do this work. And there was a day that it's probably 2 weeks, 3 weeks in. And guy had come in for a service, but the paperwork I'd gotten was wrong. And so all it said was oil change. All I did was an oil change. What I hadn't known was that they had put oil change on the front when I turned the paperwork in and said, hey, I'm done. I didn't see that there was a second page to it. And the second page, beyond the oil change, was full 1K service, which is a big deal on a motorcycle. That 1,000-mile service is a big deal. That's making sure that all the nuts and bolts from the factory are still tight. Like, that's a huge deal. And so George comes to the back, and I'm talking wings, a Harley-Davidson motorcycle mechanic manual at me, which ain't no small book. This ain't the Haynes and Chilton that you get from the auto parts. This is a big manual, and he is cussing me out. And if you know George, that is not the dude that cusses. He's very soft-spoken. He's a very quiet guy. It's very chillaxed dude. And this manual comes flying and hits the cabinet above my head and lands next to me. And I jump up. I'm mad. Like, we fighting. And I see it's George, and I know that this is the boss. I'm like, I'm not going to disrespect him. And he's going off. And everything in me wants to be like, they gave me the wrong, and to turn around and yell. And I got 2 words out before George was like, go now. And I just walked outside. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to argue with him. I'm going to go outside. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's wrong. I don't know. I'll go outside. And I had to stand outside for like an hour before he finally came out. And he had calmed down. And he was like, come back tomorrow, we'll start over. Well, come to find out, it wasn't my fault. And it wasn't George's fault either. The service writer guy had stapled that 1K paperwork to it after I'd gotten the oil change paperwork. I'd never gotten the second page. So realistically, I wasn't in the wrong. But George the next morning came up. And I'm, being in the military, also in law enforcement, you have a bad day, you get yelled at by the supervisor. Next day's a new day. You got to let it go and move on. So the next morning, George came up and he was, look, about yesterday. I said, no, we're good. I screwed up. It is what it is. And he goes, no, that's the thing. You didn't screw up at all. He goes, however, had you finished that sentence yesterday, you would have a job today. He's like, so I need you to understand, like, I'm very impressed that you didn't blow up. He's like, I could see it on your face. I could see it in your body. But I knew that if I shut you down then and I sent you outside, even though it's demeaning and it didn't, make you feel like a man, he's like, you did what you're told. You went outside. He said, I can work with that. What I can't work with is when you make a mistake and you blow up and you think you're God's gift to the motorcycle world.
Right.
He's like, I can't have that in my shop. He's like, I'm the boss, and when I say this is the way it goes, this is the way it goes. And that was my reality that, sometimes it's best to shut up. Just be the low guy on the totem pole, work your way up. And, we both know I don't carry that everywhere I go.
Right.
But and that was my dose of, had I been in the military, that would not have happened. That's not how things would have flown, So I guess that's kind of one of the many things we want to get out to the audience is sometimes it's best to have some humble pie. Be the low guy on the totem pole for a little while and work your way up and earn that respect to be able to sit at the big kids table, to be able to argue back or get your point across and be understood as somebody who has the merit to speak with the boss or identify with problems or solutions or situations.
I think that's something that's definitely going to help, for the guys who are either just getting out of high school.
Right.
They're in the 18 to 25-year-old age group where they're still learning life, honestly. And some of them, not everybody's created equal. Some people have it, they learn it quicker. Some people learn it, a lot slower. But typically that age group, is where, the guy, they're still learning what type of guy they're going to be, what type of man they're going to be. Some of them are starting families, and they're learning how to be dads. They're learning how to be husbands, and it's honestly a lot to take in at one time.
And I want everybody to listen out there in our follower world and anybody who listens to the podcast. Mike and I say all the time, we don't have the answers.
Right.
We know what a lot of the problems are. We don't have the answers. We don't have the solutions. We have what worked for us. Sometimes it's the same thing. Sometimes it's something completely different, but it was a solution one way or the other for us. And if it helps you guys, great. If it doesn't help you, hey, it's a tool for you to pass on to somebody else that, hey, this worked for, somebody you may know. And so with that, I want to put out to the younger generation, to the guys that are a lot younger than us that are listening, we're not telling you how to live your life. We're not saying, hey, whippersnapper, come listen up for a minute. Let me put some wisdom on you. That's nowhere near what we're trying to do. We're telling you through our own life experiences that we've been arrogant. We've thought we knew everything. We've thought we've been there, and we're trying to say it in a way that doesn't sound like your dad.
Well, so originally I wasn't gonna put this story on this episode, but I'll go ahead and do it. Me and my wife had got married. We got married at 21.
Right.
We were both going through college. I was working night shifts at a warehouse at the time.
She got you when you were still good looking.
Yeah. Oh, I was gorgeous.
Yeah. No, I've seen the pictures.
Anyway,
with your parted Justin Timberlake hair.
So I didn't have that. Yeah, I know. So one of the things that we got married young, and so I was still learning. Hey, how to be a husband. What did she expect from me? Did she expect me to have the answers, or did she want it to be more of a team approach, or did she want me to listen to her? Like, obviously, there's different marriages have different dynamics,
Right.
And so we're still honestly, we didn't move in together until we got married, and so we're starting. We got married in May. In September of that year, or we got married in May of 2009. In September of 2009, her biological father passed away. Now leading up to that, he got put in a hospital, and he lived, we're in Louisiana, he lived in Florida. And when he got hospitalized, she gets a call from the hospital, and we're talking to a nurse, and the nurse is like, look, if y'all want to head this way, it wouldn't be a bad idea. I can't really discuss everything over the phone, due to HIPAA and things like that. And so we kind of spent a couple hours going back and forth because the issue was we were both in college. She wasn't making very much money doing some part-time jobs. I was making decent money, but it was going to bills because I was, unfortunately I was more irresponsible than she was, but we still made some very financially irresponsible moves. And so I think I had like $200 in my bank account, right? Well, she takes and we get a call from the hospital that, hey, we might need to make a trip from Louisiana to Florida. And so I'm looking at them like, that's $200. Like I I don't have the gas money to get down there, much less hotels and food and time off work and all this other stuff. Like, I've got to look at all this. And I'm like, I don't know what to do here, you know. But I don't also, that's her dad, you know. So she's like, hey, I need to go. And so I remember I was talking to the nurse and over the phone. And I was like, look, I understand you can't tell me what I need to do. I said, but this is my predicament. This is where I'm at. And this is just being honest. This is what I've got. Do I need to make a trip down there? And I remember this nurse, she didn't know my name didn't know me from anybody. And she's like, look, if this was my dad, I would make sure I make this trip, you know. And so I was like, all right, well then we're going to take and we loaded. I remember I had to call my professors at college, let them know, hey, I'm not going to be, because we had testing coming up, all kinds of stuff, and I had to call and let them know, hey, I'm going to miss this test or this project because of this. I'll have whatever documentation I need. Had to call into work, do all this stuff. I had to change my oil before going on the trip. Like, there was so much stuff at one time where I'm like, oh my, I had $200 in the account. I just spent $40 on oil trying to change. Right. And so we get down there, and I think it was a 14-hour drive. We get down there, and unfortunately, we get down there one day. I want to say it was 3-4 days later. Unfortunately, he passes away. And I remember, for me, it thrusted me into a world where I didn't know what to do. You know, you don't train how to be a young husband and try to be a source of comfort for your wife who's mourning of her dad who passed away. And there was one of her family members that he was actually the brother of her dad. He pulled me to the side, and I remember he told me, he said, look, it's okay. Y'all got a lot going on. We want to bring y'all, come to the house. We'll get something to drink, something to eat. Y'all just chill out a little bit. And I had a conversation with him that it helped me out a lot, because it was the first time I realized, one, you can't figure out all the answers. You don't have all the answers. You know, at 23, 24 years old, I was 21 at the time. I did not have the answers. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to be a man for her, and how to answer, set up a funeral, and do all this other stuff. Like, there's all kinds of stuff that these people ask you questions, and they expect you to stand, 10 toes to the ground and answer all of them. And you don't really know what to do, And so I remember it was 4 or 5 days of after he had passed away, of my wife handling funeral arrangements and things like that, and just. The only thing I could think to do over and over and over was I would ask her, hey, are you okay? No, she's not okay. She's stressed out. She's mourning because all the financial things that I mentioned, she knows them. She handled our bills.
Well, she was his only daughter too, right?
She was his only daughter, and so she's the only one handling all this. All of our family is in Louisiana. And so, honestly, she felt alone in a lot of it.
Right.
And so she's getting pulled in a million different directions. And then you got my dumb ass every time she turns around, because she's got this worried look on her face, or she's tired, or, she's crying. And I'm, hey, you okay? Hey, you okay? She's like, if you don't stop asking me if I'm okay.
You know what the worst part about this is, and I know this is going to come off semi-sexist, but hear me out, is nobody ever looks at the difficulty that's on you. The burden.
You just don't know what to do.
Right.
You don't know what.
Right. Like it's so easy to look at her and say, okay, I know she's struggling. Like, dad just passes away. Now she's got this burden on her back that I know he didn't intend to leave it on her, but she's taking the reins because no one else is going to do it if she doesn't. And not making fun of you, but you're just an idiot on the side.
I was 21 years old. Right. Yeah, I was dumb.
Right. Like, I'm married to you, and I want to love you, and I want to support you, and I want to hold your hand through this whole process. I don't know how to do any of that, and you stand there like an idiot because you're like, I just want to, are you okay? You okay?
Right.
Because that's all you can think to do, and nobody ever thinks to pull you aside as an older male or somebody who's been through that before to be like, hey, Mike,
it's okay to just shut up.
Yeah, just stand there quietly, Occasionally, just reach over and grab her by the elbow. Just let her know you're there. You don't have to pull her. You don't have to move her. Just touch her and let her know, hey, I'm here. Like, no words have to be said. Nobody teaches you that.
Right.
Until for the final time, she goes, if you say it one more time, I'm going to punch the shit. And you're like,
oh, look, we almost went to an argument. I remember, and she's so proud of this moment. Because I remember we had to get out. We had been staying at the house that her dad had. Well, he shared that house with his girlfriend at the time.
Right.
girlfriend was a horrible person. I'm leaving it at that. You know,
Yep.
And so my wife is like, look, I need to get out of this house, and so we decided for whatever I was going to treat her. You know, we went to the good old Red Lobster. You know, and I remember we go to the Red Lobster, and she's tired, I'm tired. You're just exhausted, man. And we sit down, and you know the waiters come by and they set the little coasters down on the table or whatever. And I ordered a Coke or sweet tea or whatever it was, and I remember drinking from the cup, and I set the cup back down on the table, but I didn't set it on the coaster, and it made the little sweat ring on the table, you know. And Red Lobster's got the wooden tables.
Right.
They're not like a synthetic material; they're actual wood. They just got like lacquer or something like that on. I don't know, some type of sealant. Anyway, it left a sweat ring on the table, and I remember she looked at me with the most serious face I've ever seen her have, and she's like, "You realize you just ruined that table, and the waiter has to pay for that." And I'm like, "What?" She goes, "That's why he put coasters down, dummy." And so I'm like, I didn't realize this, and I'm also tired, so my brain's not firing on all cylinders or whatever. But I could see, hey, if you damage something at work, you're responsible for it, you know. And so I'm like, all right. So I put the cup on the coaster. I'm sitting there trying to wipe it. And you ever seen the ring that forms underneath lacquer, like a little moisture ring or whatever? That's what happens. So I'm sitting there. I'm like, I'm about to cost this server their thing. Like, I can't tip them enough to pay for this table, you know. And I remember I showed a sign of concern, and she starts busting out, dying laughing.
For like 2 seconds, my brain is like, "You're not that stupid. I know you're not that stupid."
No, I fell for it. I 100% fell for it.
The other part of my brain is either Brittany believed that and genuinely had concern, or she got you.
No, she got me.
She got you.
100%. She got me.
Oh, and I can see her face when she does it. Like, I'm picturing her.
So I'm sitting here.
It's
been 8 days, I think it was at the time. 8 days of me dealing with her being in a traumatized state, and me trying to. And so like I'm not really focusing on what she said. I'm focusing on her, you know.
Right.
And she turns around and she plays this practical joke on me or whatever, or this mind game. I'm like, okay, I see how this is going to go.
Right.
And but even to this day, she starts dying laughing when she thinks of that. But you know, that was a long, boring story just to say, hey, sometimes it's okay to not have the answers.
Right.
Sometimes it's okay not to be the one that everybody goes to. It's okay to just, like, for lack of a better term, sit down and just be quiet for a minute and see where you can fit in versus forcing yourself into something.
Real quick, everybody out on the live, we got about 2 more minutes on the live, and that's going to end. We're going to wrap up our podcast afterwards, but then don't worry, we'll be back. Give us another 15 to 20 minutes, and we'll be back on the live. Okay,
yeah, just
guys?
jump on there, and we're going to discuss this, kind of approach it from some different angles or whatever. It's going to be a little bit more entertaining, but more dealing with the people in the live.
Right. So real quick shout out to Giggle Fart. I don't know what you gave us, but thanks for doing it. That's the name, Giggle Fart.
That's the only reason you decided to do a shout out.
No, he's got a top gifter badge.
We're just going to edit this part out of the regular podcast.
I probably will.
Yeah.
As Miss Riley, thank you for the like and the share that you do out there. So anyway, back to what we're saying. So this is a little just a tad off topic for what we're going on, but it's directly involving in your relationship, because I've said it before. I love the chemistry and the bond that you and Brittany have, and it's one of the few relationships that I've ever, I say, been included in, but been exposed to. Is probably the best way to word it. And the way that the two of you have different dialects, I can tell how well you guys read each other. And growing up, you know, I never saw my parents fight or argue. Not once. They did. Like, we knew they did. But we never saw it. We never heard it. They made it a point to not do it in front of us. And I say it often. It taught me the importance of not arguing in front of your child, but it also hurt me in the relationship standpoint because I never learned how to have a healthy disagreement and you know, conversation with somebody. And mostly it was because my mom was in a very abusive physically and mentally abusive relationship prior to my father. And I know that based on the way that my parents would discuss the arguments afterwards, because I would ask mom and dad, like, where'd you guys go? How come you guys left the house, or what are you doing? This, and my mom would say we had to have a conversation, and that's just where it was. That's where it was left at. There was never any in depth. But I remember one time asking my parents, my mom specifically, if her and dad ever fought, like, because we never saw it. I was like, do you guys ever fight? And my mom says, oh, yeah, no, we argue all the time. Because all I ever saw was my mom say, Bill, do this. And my dad go, yes, dear. And he would do it. There was no anything in front of us that would make me think that they have a disagreement. And she would say, no, I yell at your dad all the time. She goes, we go back and forth for rounds. She goes, but I'm not doing that in front of you. That's a side of adulthood you don't need to be a part of. And I know that they were trying to protect us, but it's one of the things that I like about being at your house or being around you and your wife is when you guys disagree with something, you don't do it in front of anybody, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's very much that I'm not going to discuss your life outside of that, like this is what we're talking about, but I'm not going to discuss the specifics of the argument or whatever the disagreement is. But I've always noticed that within 10 to 15 minutes afterwards, you guys are asking the normal, what do you want to eat? Or, we'll laugh.
Just move on rather than hanging on to it.
Right. And so it brings me back to our topic today of the things that we're not taught, the things that nobody ever said, like, hey, you're going to find the love of your life, get married, build a house, and build a family and do all of this. Nobody ever told you about the times where it's like, hey, it's going to suck. You guys are going to hate each other's guts for a couple of days, or you're going to forget her birthday or not get her anything for her birthday or Christmas or Valentine's Day.
It happens. But lessons were learned.
Right. And so, like, it brings me back to, my first marriage. She was married to me. I was married to the military, and I was not the husband that she deserved. Where my second marriage, I said, okay, I'm going to dedicate myself to this marriage. I'm going to make sure I have a job that puts me at home more often. I get to spend more time with her, get more time with the kids. And I laughed about it when I got divorced because my first marriage ended because I was gone too long. I was always away. I was always at work. I was always doing X, Y, Z, and my family wasn't number one. My second marriage, I was home too much. My family was I was too far up their back ends, and I was always there, and there was no break from me. And so I'm thinking in my brain, like, where is the middle ground?
Right.
Like,
find somewhere in the middle.
Like, where do I do this? And so recently, and tonight, it's been a development for me. And I'm seeing this young lady, and she ends up having car trouble all day. And known about it for a day or so, but I wasn't sure what the problem was because I couldn't get it to actually happen with me being there or her to know what to look for to tell me. And so on our way home, it finally starts happening. Of course, I'm on the whole other end of the parish, and she's, coming from a different parish. And I'm talking her through it, and her car's breaking down every 10 minutes. She's got to let it cool down for 20 minutes. And, she finally gets to the house, and I go, look, it's probably a thermostat or it's a water pump. We're going to go with the cheap part, and I'm going to fix that before I jump into the, a couple $100 part. And, she pulls in the driveway and lets it cool down, and she's like, do I need to do anything? I'm like, no. I'm like, this is where I excel. I've got this. And it dawned on me that neither one of my first two wives, if I was mowing the lawn, working on a car, outside, whatever, one of the things I always wanted was, like my childhood, if my dad was, it didn't matter if he was weed eating for 5 minutes, if he was weed eating for an hour. My mom at some point came outside with a glass of water. She would make him turn off whatever machine he was working with and come sit down with her for 5 minutes and take a break, drink his water. And that was like her thing. That was like, I'm checking on
I'm just thinking, like, the number of times that I've fought with a small motored, small engine thing.
Right.
Finally get it to crank.
Right.
And this woman's going to come outside and make me have to shut off. Nope.
Look, I say this with nothing but love for my father. everything that man owns runs like a well-oiled machine.
Right.
Like, he's got the gift of mechanics. Like, he puts every mechanic I've ever met to shame.
Right.
I don't know. I would fight with things that he owned. Chainsaws, lawnmowers, like, struggle to get it going. And that dude would come out and just touch it, and it would just magically be like, oh, hello, and start running just perfectly fine. But it was one of those things where, like, tonight I'm out there and I'm burning the crap out of my hands. Like, the motor's cooled down. Like, it hasn't been running for over an hour, and it's still hot as shit. And the radiator fluid is still hot, you know, and you got to drain a little bit out and do all this other crap. And I remember her walking out as I'm in the middle of fighting to get the lower radiator hose off, and because that's where the thermostat's at, right? And she just sits down, and I was like, can I help you? Like, not trying to be a jerk. Like, I was just, what do you want? You know, like, I'm in the middle of something. It blew my mind that I look at that when I was dating other women. I would look for that. Like, why do you never come outside and make sure I didn't die in this Louisiana
Now that
heat?
she's being nice to you, you're going to be a jerk.
Right. She walks out, you know, squats down next to me, and I was like, can I help you? And she goes, I'm just checking on you. Brought you a cold Red Bull. And I was like, inside of my body, all of the inside feelings went, oh, it's here. That's what I've been looking for. Everything on the outside was like, oh, well, thank you. Can you put it over there? I've got my hands in your motor. I can't really get that right now. Because I'm like, the other part of me is like, I got to keep this wall up. I don't want to get, you know, sucked into this or whatever. But again, it's that thing that nobody ever teaches you how to do everything that we got to know how to do as a man. You know, as far as mechanics, somebody's going to come out and they're going to be like, all right, this is how you do this. This is how you replace this, or this is how you hit the starter with a hammer. This is where the starter is to hit it with a hammer. Nobody ever teaches you that. So you have that humility, that humble pie, where you are 17, 18 years old laying under the car hitting everything with a hammer.
That's what I did.
I know. That's why I'm being specific here.
I didn't even have a hammer. I had a piece of scrap metal.
Right.
Scrap iron.
Right. But that's that humble pie where you're like, now, if I was like, hey, Mike, you got to hit the starter with a hammer, you're like, okay, I know where it is. Give me 2 seconds.
Don't know what direction I'm hitting it, but I know I'm
hitting the hell out of it. But that's what we're trying to get at with our episode tonight is sometimes you got to have that humble pie and just let it happen, you know, and swallow it down, let it be. And that's when it's happening, realize it's happening. You know, don't look at, unfortunately, it is a gift horse. It's a gift horse is right there. Don't look it in the mouth, because that's life giving you your humble pie and saying, hey, sometimes it's right here and you got to not be an asshole to it. But I think that's a big step that you and I are trying to take with our podcast is we're trying to give out that lessons through our experiences, our hard knock life, as we called it back in the 80s and 90s, that, you know, we're not hurting. We're not billionaires, you know. We're not, you know, in the Oval Office, but through our experiences, we have in-depth knowledge of when you're on top and when you're on the bottom and everybody and everything is kicking you. It's time to eat some humble pie and just own it and learn from it, and don't let it tie you to the ground, because that's when you get into the checkout phases or the it's never going to get better phases, or the poor me's and all that. But you know, there's ways that you can eat your humble pie and move forward and progress and become a successful member of your, what do you call it, your group of people. You know?
I'm just letting you know I'm not helping you out with this.
I know.
I'm letting you just work through it.
Like,
I'm letting him struggle. Guys, I hope
mean,
y'all enjoyed this episode today. If you did, great. If you didn't, that's fine. Find another podcast. I'm just kidding. Regardless, shoot us a like, shoot us a follow, do all those things. I really do hope y'all enjoyed it. If there's something you want to hear about, or you know, something you may disagree with, you know, we're perfectly fine with that. We're big enough for that. Shoot us an email at coffeeandthebull@yahoo.com. We're looking forward to getting some of those, and we'd like to kind of start a dialogue with you. you have any ideas or something you want, a route you want us to go.
Right.
So in the meantime, we're going to say adios and toodaloo.
So stupid. Adios.